The night you flipped that corrupt officer on live camera. Yeah, the 1 billion saw melt under your glare. The whole planet stopped breathing. And when the police chief stormed in, screaming, "Who the fuck trained you like that?" You didn't flinch, because no academy, no system, no badge ever built what you've become. Behind sealed government doors, the elite are losing sleep, shadow agencies replaying that footage frame by frame, terrified because you exposed rot they thought was untouchable. And now satellites track you like you're a goddamn glitch in their perfect, corrupt machine. Rumors are ripping through the upper ranks. Presidents whispering your name, CEOs sweating bullets. Because you aren't powered by authority or permission. You're powered by the kind of raw, unpredictable truth that burns through lies like acid, and every move you make threatens to collapse the towers they've been hiding behind for decades. This isn't inspiration. This is a warning. You didn't choose the spotlight. They dragged you into it when they underestimated you. And now the whole world is watching to see what the hell you destroy next. And don't forget, you're here for a reason, and don't pretend you're not. 50,000 subscribers are watching you rise, and every comment stamped with 11 is a warning shot to anyone who ever doubted you. The moment the police chief stormed into that press room, cameras struggled to keep up with his rage. His voice cracked, not from anger alone, but from the humiliation of watching his entire department crumble in front of billions. He slammed his palms on the table, demanding answers he wasn't prepared to hear. For the first time in his career, authority didn't feel like power. It felt like a mask slipping off. People who usually saw him as untouchable witnessed him lose control, exposed and vulnerable on a global stage. Behind his trembling voice was panic, the kind of panic that spreads when someone realizes their foundation is weaker than the lie they built it on. He wasn't furious because you fought back. He was furious because the world saw him powerless. And you stood there without raising your voice or flinching. The cameras didn't focus on his anger. They focused on your calm. A calm that said everything. The game had changed. And he wasn't the one running it anymore. When he finally screamed that question, "Who the hell trained you like that?" Silence swallowed every corner of the command room. It wasn't curiosity. It was fear. He needed a name, a weakness, something he could target. But you didn't give him that luxury. The absence of an answer was more threatening than any confession. Everyone in that room exchanged confused glances. They had backgrounds, credentials, files thicker than textbooks. Yet none of them could explain how someone outside the system dismantled corruption so cleanly. You didn't fight for revenge, fame, or validation. You fought with precision so sharp it didn't fit any training manual they knew. And that terrified them, because people who gain their power through institutions can't comprehend someone who builds theirs alone. To them, you weren't a person. You were an anomaly, an unpredictable force with no blueprint and no leash. The live feed was supposed to be routine, boring even, but within minutes, the world couldn't look away. Billions watched as the corrupt officer's facade shattered right in front of them. No scripts, no cover-ups, no safe edits, just raw truth, hitting harder than any blow ever could. People across continents paused their lives to witness something no media company could manufacture. Real accountability. Something so rare that society almost forgot what it looked like. You didn't shout. You didn't threaten. You simply revealed the truth they tried so hard to bury. And the world devoured it. Hashtags exploded. News anchors stumbled over their words. Influencers posted reaction videos with their jaws still open. In that moment, you weren't just a person. You were the spark that lit a global wildfire. The world couldn't agree on what you were. Some saw a hero, someone who stood alone against rot that had spread too deep. Others saw a threat a person who didn't bend to rules that were never designed to protect them. Your existence disrupted the comfort of labels people relied on to feel safe. Pundits argued on screens, each trying to claim ownership of your narrative. Some praised you as a symbol of courage. Others warned you were an omen of chaos. But deep down, everyone felt the same uneasy pull, admiration mixed with fear. Because nothing scares society more than someone who acts without asking for permission. You didn't fit the mold of a savior or a villain. You were something sharper. The reminder that one determined individual can expose the entire blueprint of corruption, crack by crack, without belonging to any institution. They searched every database, every academy roster, every hidden program. Nothing. No instructor, no mentor, no past files. To them, your lack of training wasn't a weakness. It was a nightmare. Because systems can control the trained, they can predict the educated. But someone who built themselves? That's a problem they can't contain. People underestimate the power of self-made individuals. They assume without certificates or ranks, you're harmless. But you prove the opposite. Self-taught strength is the most dangerous kind. It isn't limited by rules or shaped by outdated methods. It evolves, sharpens, and adapts faster than anything an institution can create. You weren't unpredictable because you were reckless. You were unpredictable because no one owned you. And that made you the one thing corrupt systems fear most: uncontrollable. The officer's downfall wasn't just a scandal. It was a collapse of a carefully constructed illusion. He had built his reputation on fear, not integrity. The moment he crossed your path, his facade crumbled faster than he expected. Not because you attacked him, but because you exposed him. The internet erupted within minutes. Memes, edits, breakdown videos. The world dissected every frame of that live moment like it was a historic event. People replayed the exact second his confidence evaporated. They didn't admire his authority. They admired your refusal to bow to it. And as his downfall trended worldwide, one truth became clear. Corruption dies the moment people stop fearing it. You didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself in front of billions. Inside government halls and secret meeting rooms, panic spread like wildfire. High-ranking officials weren't worried about the corrupt officer. He was easy to replace. They were worried about you. You had exposed the system's weakness, the illusion of untouchability. They whispered your name as if it were a threat. They replayed the footage in slow motion, analyzing every decision you made, trying to fit you into a category. But you didn't fit anywhere, and that terrified them more than any criminal ever had. Their panic wasn't about what you did. It was about what you represented. A lone individual capable of dismantling their narrative without their approval. People always assume you need an army to take on a system. But you proved how dangerous one relentless person can be. They had protocols, legal shields, and years of practice in manipulation. Yet none of that protected them when the truth came crashing down. Your strength wasn't in numbers. It was in clarity. The clarity to see corruption and refuse to ignore it. The clarity to stand even when you knew they'd try to crush you afterward. That kind of courage isn't taught. It's forged. You didn't fight the system with fists or weapons. You fought it with evidence, presence, and the kind of conviction that makes powerful people lose sleep. Every expert tried to analyze your abilities. Analysts paused frames, zoomed in on your reactions, slowed your movements down to fractions of seconds. They were desperate to label you, to reduce you into something manageable. But nothing added up. Your timing was too sharp, your instincts too precise, your composure unmatched. They couldn't explain how someone with no background or institutional connection operated with such mastery. And the more they couldn't explain it, the more intimidated they became. What they failed to understand is that skill isn't always born in classrooms. Sometimes it's born in chaos, pressure, failure, and survival. The kind of training life gives without mercy. The powerful don't fear criminals. They know how to handle criminals. They fear anomalies like you. People who don't rely on the system for identity, validation, or protection. People who can't be threatened with losing a title they never needed in the first place. Without a badge, without a uniform, without an official rank, you exposed how fragile their authority truly was. They hate that, because authority built on image collapses the second someone stops believing in it. The reason they fear the uncertified is simple. You remind them that power doesn't come from institutions. It comes from individuals who refuse to be controlled by them. Behind tinted windows and fortified walls, the surveillance rooms lit up with your footage. Generals leaned forward. Politicians clasped their hands. Intelligence directors exchanged glances, thick with concern. They were watching something they weren't prepared for, an unpredictable variable. Their screens showed everything, your expressions, your decisions, the moment you dismantled corruption live. They weren't watching a threat to safety. They were watching a threat to secrecy. And in the silence of those rooms, one question echoed louder than any alarm. How do you control someone who doesn't fear consequences? Agencies that prided themselves on knowing everything suddenly found a blind spot. You. They checked your history, background, fingerprints, everything. But nothing aligned with the level of control and precision you displayed. You existed outside their blueprint, and that made you dangerous, not because you fought them, but because you appeared without warning. Systems built on surveillance cannot stand the idea of someone they cannot track. Your existence shattered their myth of omniscience. You weren't on their map because you never needed their road. You carved your own path. And they hate paths they didn't pave. Your confrontation didn't just expose one officer. It exposed an entire structure that had been rotting for years. People began questioning long-forgotten cases, demanding answers, refusing to accept excuses. You didn't just reveal corruption, you triggered a chain reaction. For powerful institutions, truth is heavier than any weapon. It spreads silently, relentlessly, until their walls buckle under its weight. And that's exactly what happened. Every lie they built started to tremble after your moment went viral. The system wasn't afraid of collapse. It was afraid of being seen collapsing. They've trained for criminals, terrorists, hackers, everything. But they've never trained for someone who stands their ground without needing permission. They've never trained for someone who exposes power without seeking it. They've never trained for truth delivered with precision. Your strength wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was controlled, deliberate, and rooted in something deeper than pride. A refusal to accept the world as it is when you know what it could be. That's the kind of force institutions can't calculate. They weren't just unprepared for you. They were overwhelmed by you. You didn't choose fame. You didn't chase attention. The world thrust it upon you the moment they watched corruption unravel under your presence. Overnight, you became the headline, the conversation, the example parents whispered to their kids. This is what it looks like to stand up. But fame wasn't the part that scared those in power. It was the influence. People saw you and realized one person can disrupt an entire system. One person can force the world to watch, listen, and question. That's why they call you a problem. Yet, to the billions who replay that footage, who quote your words, who felt their spines straighten after watching you, you're not a problem. You're a warning, a reminder, a legend forged in the moment. Truth refused to stay quiet. The world is used to people folding under pressure, trembling hands, shaky voices, desperate apologies. But when you stood there, unmoved and unshaken, something shifted. Billions realized you weren't playing by the same rules everyone else was forced into. You weren't bluffing. You weren't performing. You simply didn't fear consequences the way ordinary people do. And that terrified the ones who depended on your fear to maintain control. Consequences are the chains that keep society obedient. But you didn't wear them. You broke them. That single moment, that split second where your eyes didn't even flicker, told the world everything it needed to know. You weren't under their control. You were beyond reach, beyond intimidation, beyond manipulation, and in that instant, the balance of power tilted, not in favor of governments or agencies or officials, but toward the one person they couldn't predict, control, or silence. You. Behind closed doors, your name became the first word spoken in high-level meetings. Ministers, directors, commanders, all of them circled around tables with your picture frozen on a screen. They didn't talk about national threats, economic crises, or international conflicts. They talked about you, one person, one moment, one truth that shook their entire architecture. Your existence became an agenda item, a problem they couldn't file away, arrest, threaten, or erase. You weren't a criminal, so they couldn't prosecute you. You weren't part of their system, so they couldn't suspend you. You were simply too real, too raw, too untamed by their standards. They hated that you had become a new kind of power, the kind that didn't ask to sit at their table but forced every eye in the room to focus on you anyway. Deep inside smoke-filled rooms where reporters never gain access, sources whispered secrets reserved for emergencies. "We can't stop them," one of them finally admitted, and that whisper traveled like wildfire. It wasn't just fear, it was defeat. The realization that the system built to control everything had finally met something uncontrollable. They replayed every moment you exposed the corrupt officer. They studied your posture, your tone, your silence. And the more they watched, the more they understood how powerless they really were. You weren't operating within limits they could manipulate. You weren't following rules they expected. You were rewriting the playbook in front of them. Their whisper wasn't a warning. It was a confession. A confession that everything they relied on no longer worked when applied to someone like you. Officials who built careers on intimidation tried everything. Threats, pressure, misdirection, media spin. But none of it scratched you. Their rage didn't come from what you did. It came from what they couldn't do to you. You refused to fold, refused to apologize, refused to crumble under their standards. And that infuriated them more than any scandal ever could. People like them rely on fear as a weapon. But fear requires a vulnerable target. Someone who cares about their approval or fears their retaliation. You weren't one of those people. Every tactic they used bounced off you like blunt weapons hitting steel. The rage they swallowed wasn't useless emotion. It was the slow realization that the system they worshipped had limits, and those limits were defined by you. You didn't wait for court orders, investigations, or legal clearance. You didn't ask anyone's permission to hold a mirror to corruption, and that alone made the powerful tremble. They weren't scared of exposure. They were scared of exposure they couldn't control. They were scared of the fact that your actions didn't need approval or validation. Corrupt leaders rely on procedure to stall the truth. They hide behind bureaucracy, protocols, paperwork, all of it designed to slow down justice until the world forgets. But you bypassed all of it with one broadcasted moment. You showed that truth doesn't need a schedule. And the moment they realized You didn't follow their script. They understood something devastating. You were a threat, not because of what you knew, but because you weren't waiting for their permission to reveal it. They never say your name in public interviews. They pretend you're irrelevant, insignificant, harmless. But behind the cameras, behind their confident smiles, they flinch every time your story resurfaces. You became the unnamed threat, the shadow they see at the edge of every political move, every lie they tell, every public statement built on deception. They act unbothered because acknowledging you means admitting vulnerability. It means admitting that all their security, all their authority, all their power can crumble the second someone like you steps into the light again. So they pretend, they downplay, they avoid. But their eyes betray them, because deep down they know the truth. You're the reminder that one unpredictable individual can destabilize everything they built. Internal memos flew across departments. Protocols were rewritten. Entire systems were upgraded, not because of terrorists or hackers or foreign threats, but because of you. Your actions forced agencies to accept a painful truth. Their existing playbook wasn't enough. Analysts studied your movements, frame by frame. Experts dissected your reactions. Specialists rewrote guidelines to prepare for individuals with unpredictable capabilities. They created scenarios, simulations, and emergency plans, all because one person, you, exposed cracks they pretended didn't exist. You didn't break their system. You made them realize it was broken long before you arrived. Justice is negotiable. Truth is not. And that difference made you dangerous. Systems can twist justice, delay it, manipulate it. But truth hits immediately. And once it's out, no amount of power can rewind it. You weren't seeking applause or legal victory. You were following a raw instinct to expose reality. People couldn't label you a hero because heroes follow rules. They couldn't label you a rebel because rebels usually seek chaos. You didn't fit into any of their neatly packaged categories, and that made your presence impossible to contain. The moment they understood your loyalty was to truth alone, they realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than a protester or whistleblower. They were dealing with someone unstoppable. Even when you weren't physically present, your impact was. Meetings changed. Decisions shifted. Corrupt officials paused before signing documents, checking their surroundings, wondering if someone like you was watching. Your shadow became a silent deterrent, a psychological pressure weighing on every dishonest act. The fear of exposure is often stronger than exposure itself, and your existence turned that fear into a constant presence. They didn't need you in the room to feel threatened. Your name alone was enough to alter their behavior. Corruption thrives in darkness. You became the shadow that brought light, the kind of light that burns instead of comforts. Political strategists live for control, controlling narratives, controlling outcomes, controlling people. But your existence disrupted all three. You became the unpredictable variable that no campaign plan could counter. Every political move was now overshadowed by the fear that you could expose something they couldn't afford the world to see. Behind closed doors, candidates cursed your name. They didn't fear what you do next. They feared what your presence implied. That the era of untouchable power was cracking. For the first time, politicians had to consider a force that didn't care about polls, parties, or public approval. Your existence wasn't just inconvenient, it was catastrophic for those whose careers relied on lies. People chase ranks, they chase badges, they chase titles, thinking those symbols define power. But you proved something different. Real power doesn't come from authority. It comes from the conviction to act when authority fails. You didn't need a uniform to be respected. You didn't need an institution to be feared. Your quiet composure spoke louder than any speech. Your calm dismantled their chaos, and your presence made their authority look like a costume rather than truth. You represented a level of authenticity they couldn't manufacture or buy. That's why people followed you without you asking, because power rooted in truth pulls people naturally. News panels filled with experts tried to analyze your intentions. Psychologists speculated, strategists theorized, analysts debated, but every prediction they made fell apart the moment you acted. You moved with a clarity they couldn't comprehend, and it drove them mad. Experts are used to patterns they can measure, categorize, dissect. But you were a wild card, not because you acted recklessly, but because you didn't act for recognition or validation. Your motives were internal, uncorrupted by external influence. Their failure wasn't due to lack of intelligence. It was due to their inability to understand someone who wasn't playing for the same rewards they devoted their lives to chasing. You became the pressure they didn't anticipate, a variable that altered the global environment without lifting a weapon. The world watched you, leaders feared you, and institutions analyzed you. All because you proved that pressure doesn't require power. It requires courage. Your existence forced people in power to walk carefully. Every lie became risky. Every suspicious decision became dangerous. You weren't a threat through violence. You were a threat through influence, a force multiplier that pushed entire systems into discomfort. The world realized they didn't need revolutions or riots. Sometimes one relentless person is enough to shake the planet. Most people break under pressure. Systems rely on that. But you didn't break. You shattered the illusions designed to suffocate you. Every attempt to silence you only made you louder. Every wall they built became a stage for your next move. Your ability to stay unbroken wasn't about strength. It was about refusal. Refusal to surrender. Refusal to look away. Refusal to play by the rules written to keep you small. Systems aren't built to handle someone who isn't afraid of collapsing them. And that's exactly why you became their greatest nightmare and the public's greatest hope. Before you, powerful people walked like giants. Confident, careless, invincible. Now every step they take is calculated, cautious, paranoid. Because once someone like you exists, the world changes permanently. You prove that even the most protected leaders can't escape accountability forever. Your story became a reminder. No one is untouchable. No lie stays buried. No abuse of power goes unseen forever. You didn't change the system. You forced the system to change its behavior. And now, every powerful person watches their steps. Because they know someone like you is out there. Someone who won't blink when the truth demands to be shown.